Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once more to Beverley Minster. This is a rather different evening. You could say that it's going to be something like a cross between the Wreath Lectures and Sunday night at the London Palladium. In that, as always, there will be at the core of our evening a lecture by Marcus Ramshaw, who, as most of you will now know, has done the most enormous amount of research on the history of Beverley, and indeed has uncovered previously completely unknown bits of our history, and he continues to do so. But this evening is rather different in that you haven't just got a talk and a few questions afterwards, but also a reading of a very, very early, somewhat bawdy English play in English, which Marcus will explain as he goes along. And then we've also got the Beverley Garland Dancers, who are going to dance for us at the end. And as always, we have Daniela, who is very much an expert on medieval and Renaissance music. So many thanks for that. Also, thank you to BBC Radio Humberside, who've taken an interest in this and given us a bit of a plug, so thank you to them. Thank you to all those people, to the Minster and everything. Now, normally, they're always free, these evenings. We ask for a donation. We normally ask for £5. If you can manage a bit more this evening, that would be helpful, because as you can imagine, there are quite a number of additional expenses to mount this particular evening. A plug for the next one. The next one is perhaps the most extraordinary story that Marcus has ever uncovered. Tagged in the back of a manuscript history, almost contemporary history, of the life and martyrdom of Thomas à Becket, written by a monk living in the great Abbey of Citeaux in France, are a few pages in which he tells the story of his sister, Margaret of Beverley, who went on pilgrimage to Jerusalem. And if you think you have problems with your package holidays, it's nothing to what happened to Margaret, because she got caught up in the Saracen siege of Jerusalem. And she wasn't just some fainting lady, as it were, sort of overwhelmed by what was going on. She apparently, by her own account, donned armor and was busy slinging stones at the besieging forces, and was captured by the Saracens and escaped and got back to France in the end. And we knew nothing about this person before this bit of research that Marcus did, but he can be talking about that. It really is an incredible, almost unbelievable story of this woman who originally came from Beverley, but led a quite remarkable life in medieval Europe and in the Middle East. So the timetabling roughly for this evening is that Marcus will give his lecture, which will last for about 3/4 an hour or so. There will be an opportunity, as always, for some questions. And then there will be a reading of this play, a dramatized reading. There's a few of us going to do that for you. It's quite an extraordinary. They didn't spare your blushes in the Middle Ages, I can tell you. And then we will have our dancing, and there will be music sort of interspersed as we go along. So it will run until about 9 o'clock. I should just point out that as they do normally with events in the Minster, in the unlikely event of the place going on fire, you can either go back out the way you came in, or there's an entrance out along that side aisle there, and that also out there are the loos, should anybody need them on this rather cold night. So now I hand over to Marcus.
Good evening. Can you all hear me clearly? Excellent. Actually, that's perfect pitch, I think. And welcome on a cold January long winter's night. I know we're still very much in midwinter. Thank you, Peter, for that lovely introduction. And I am delighted to have my Christmas present wish fulfilled, because whilst I was preparing for this talk, I was asking around at the Minster throughout November and early December, I need some Morris dancers, and I can't find any. Does anybody know of any Morris dancers? I really need them for my next talk. And then comes Beverley Minster's Christmas Tree Festival on the same day as the Christmas market, the biggest Christmas market in the country and the biggest Christmas tree festival in the country, and you can't move. I couldn't get to Saturday market, so I gave up shopping and going to the market and decided to go to Flemingate instead, which was also crowded, and there, to my amazement, were the Beverley Garland Dancers Morris dancing, surrounded by a couple of hundred people with a wonderful round of applause, and I just had to go up and interrupt, in between dances, and say, "You are the answer to a prayer. I want to hire you for Beverley Minster." So you see, miracles do happen, you know. Now, as I said, I'm going to talk for 45 minutes, and there's a question and answer session at the end. We'll be quite strict on the timings. And you should also all have a handout. The handout is for you to take home and keep. There are extra copies up here at the front if you need them, or if you want to take an extra one. The handout you won't really need until after the talk. It basically is a copy of the play, Dame Siriph, in a modern English verse translation. So you can either follow through it, and at the end of the handout, there's a poster about the next talk on Margaret of Beverley and the Third Crusade. So today, though, is the story of the student and the girl. In the long drawn-out winter nights of January, when there are only 8 hours of daylight and 16 hours of darkness, there may well seem little to do in terms of either work or leisure. Today, of course, we have the television, or the radio, or the internet to distract us and whilst away the winter nights. Alternatively, we might read a book, or if you're me, you'll end up writing a book about medieval history. But none of these options were available in the Middle Ages. Obviously no radio and television, but few people could read. And even after the invention of the printing press in the 1440s, books were prohibitively expensive. But even if one could afford a book, a big problem was having enough light to read by. Candles were expensive. And apart from the most wealthy, most people would have had to deal with the firelight to see by. There might be some oil lamps, there might be some reed torches available, but even these won't be brilliant. So the firelight is not brilliant. It can be supposed in the evening that people might spend their time making or repairing things. That's what I always imagined. Furniture, clothes, shoes, and if you've got children, you might fashion a toy wooden horse and a knight. But any delicate, intricate work, such as embroidery, would have been hampered by the limited light, and in time might ruin your eyesight. It was probably that most of the evening in the Middle Ages, and here's a lesson for the modern world, was spent in that increasingly lost art of simple conversation. People would have spent time telling stories. Stories of their ancestors as much as stories that they heard in the village or in the town, and stories of the politics of the day. And that would have kept that oral tradition alive. Now today, this evening, I will look at some of the options for home entertainment towards the end of my talk. But first I want to cover 3 areas that both by daylight and in the long evenings to a certain extent, people found some fun, some frivolity and joy. And that's what this evening is going to be about. It's basically about fun. So whatever you take away from tonight, I hope you're going to have a fun evening, either through my talk, or through the play, or through the dancing. Now, the three areas I'm going to cover to begin with are music, theatre, and dancing, and how they operated in medieval Beverley. Starting with music, and with the building we are in, Beverley Minster. We are surrounded by sculptured eyes and faces, especially down the north aisle of the nave, that entire arcade, and by the porch where you came in. And they are sculptured faces of both townsfolk and angels, playing an astonishing variety of musical instruments, ranging from the bagpipes and the portable organs. There are two portable organs, one carried by an individual and one very miraculously carried in the tip of their elbow by an angel. I mean, only an angel could have, a portable organ would still be quite a heavy, quite a big thing, and to play it and handle at the same time as an individual would be quite something. But also there are lutes, trumpets, recorders, a whole variety of string and wind instruments. Lutes, as Dr. Daniela Fountain, who did a PhD in musicology of the 16th century at Hull University, so actually she should really be giving the talk. She knows more about music than I do. The rebec, form of recorder, drums, early forms of guitars, cymbals, harps, and that's just in the Minster, because there are many more in St. Mary's Church in Beverley, including the famous minstrel pier with its pillar, with its original paintwork. In fact, the two main churches of Beverley, the Minster and St. Mary's, contain more carvings of medieval musicians than anywhere else in the British Isles. Why is this the case? It is certainly not just a coincidence, and it's certainly not just fashion. Beverley, as I've repeated in so many of my lectures, but in the past, this is the 15th one today, Beverley in the Middle Ages, we often think of as the 11th biggest town in England in the 1377 poll tax returns, with a population of about 7,000 to 8,000 people in today's numbers. But actually that's not really a very helpful way of looking at it, because Beverley is the second biggest town in all of northern Britain, only beaten by York. It is bigger than Durham, or Hull, or Newcastle, or Carlisle. It's bigger than Edinburgh or anywhere in Scotland. So its influence across northern Britain is huge, and it is an inland international port, trading right up, not just with the Hanseatic League, but right up to Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Russia, at the top of the Baltic, and even regularly fishing off the coast of Iceland. It's very possible, Donald Trump won't like this, that Beverley might have got to Greenland before he did. Beverley, like many towns, and most towns, had a musicians' or a minstrels' guild, which governed the behaviour and it set the pay, the expected pay, and the conditions and sought of minstrels, and sought to maintain high standards. It also looked after minstrels whenever they were in need, and would help pay for funerals for their widows, as well as a form of quality control. And there are extensive surviving archives from the medieval Beverley minstrels, an important and clearly a very wealthy guild. Musicians in the Middle Ages were actually remarkably well paid. And it was probably the Guild of Minstrels which actually paid for most of those statues in the Minster, by the porch and by the north door, collectively as a guild. And in St. Mary's, much the same, and individual minstrels, we do know, because they've carved their names, are on some of the pillars in the minstrel's pillar in St. Mary's Church. Now, I have just turned onto the wrong page. Sorry, I don't normally do that. So minstrels, as I said, could earn good money. The Beverley governors, that is the medieval equivalent of the town council, although Beverley was run by the Archbishop of York, it still elected 12 governors, also known as aldermen. In 1520, they paid 2 shillings to the king's minstrels for playing in the town hall on a one-off occasion. This one-off payment of 2 shillings, or 24 pence, is 12 times the daily income of most people, most villagers. Even a crossbowman or a soldier in the king's army fighting in France or in Scotland was only paid 2 pence a day. So you can see the daily income was considerable. The minstrels in Beverley and in most other places also had a second job. That's sometimes they're also known as the waits in the evening. And that is, they form part of the town's night watch, which patrolled the town after curfew. Every town in the Middle Ages had a curfew, normally at about 10 o'clock. And the town watch would go around. The curfew was partially to deter thieves and burglars, or anybody up to no good, but it was actually principally there to look out for the greatest danger in any medieval town, which was fire. Any fire that might break out could quickly reduce Beverley to ashes, as it did in 1188. Normally, a guild only controlled its members within the boundaries of a particular town or liberty. But Beverley's Guild of Minstrels was unique in England in that it governed by royal command all minstrels in most of northern England. Specifically, all minstrels between the River Trent in Nottinghamshire to Stoke-on-Trent in the south, and as far as the River Tyne, flowing through Newcastle in the north. The term minstrels also clearly was a broad term and didn't simply cover musicians, though they formed the majority. It also included performers of any kind: jugglers, fire eaters, acrobats, contortionists, jesters, fools, comic actors, storytellers, and through both their songs, tales, and acts, that is actually how, for most people, news spread throughout medieval England. Now, it is clear that one of the reasons that medieval Beverley has such a rich musical tradition is because of Beverley Minster, which, as well as maintaining a grammar school in its churchyard, which still, of course, exists today and is, I believe, the oldest state school in England, dating back to circa 700, founded by St. John of Beverley, but the Minster also had a very famous song school and a music school of some repute. And this was in addition to the Minster's own large choir, which was controlled by the precentor, who was appointed by the canons and was normally one of their number. Music and theatre clearly have a close connection. So it's really not that surprising that Beverley, with its musical heritage, should also become an early important centre in the development of English theatre and drama. What is surprising is just how much early English theatre emerged in Beverley. One of the reasons that Beverley's early role in theatre has been overlooked by medieval historians is because the first reference to it comes from a very unexpected, yet a highly reliable source. It is dated 1215 and comes from the Alia Miracula III, which is a collection of miracles of St. John, the Bishop of Beverley. Well, York, actually. Since you, as a medieval historian, would only be looking for details about the early church, or saints or miracles, this is not a source you would expect most medieval historians to go to if they're researching into the history of English theatre. But it is in the background context to one of St. John's miracles in which this can be found. Also, the development, by the way, a slight aside here, medieval historians were a fairly rare breed. And the reason Beverley gets overlooked so much is that most medieval historians concentrate on the south of England, They don't really bother with the north. And if they do bother with the north, they'll only really look at York, or Durham, or maybe Newcastle. Beverley, they don't know where it is. Never heard of it. It's probably in America somewhere. But actually, even medieval historians who specialize in early English theatre are largely Canadians, of course. I'm sure you knew that. But actually, in 1978, the University of Toronto set up a department to study the history of English theatre, and they've been publishing archives called the Reed Project, the Record of Early English Drama, which works its way around, and its publisher, of course, is the University of Toronto Press. So, there you go. Canada does have a claim on us. Anyway, back to this miracle of St. John of Beverley. In this miracle, he ostensibly brings to life a young boy who has fallen and been killed from a great height after climbing up the Minster, which was then being rebuilt after the fire of 1188, and would have been something of a building site. Now, don't worry about the boy, he'll get brought back to life. I covered him in an earlier talk. But in the beginning of the miracle, we are told that it happened one summer that within the cemetery enclosure of the Church of St. John on the northern side, a representation of the Sunday resurrection was performed by the words and actions of players wearing masks of both sexes, as is usual. As is usual. And a great multitude had flocked together there, having been drawn by various entreatments, for pleasure, of course, or to be amazed, or perhaps this is written by a monk, by the way, it's some wishful thinking here, for the pleasure, of course, to the sacred purpose of being inspired with devotion. Indeed, when a large number of people could not get in because of the dense crowd standing around, especially some who were very short in stature, several people entered into the church, either so that they might pray or look at the paintings, or to avoid the boredom of the day through some sort of recreation or amusement. Then some young boys, having gone through the doorways of the church, by some lucky chance found a half-open door through which stairs ascended to the roof. And running to it with boyish recklessness, they climbed the arches of the church and over the walls, step by step, with the intention, I suppose, that they might look more freely upon both the clothes and the costumes and the gestures of the actors, and hear their speeches more easily through the great windows of the turrets, or if there were any openings in the glass windows, which were still being built. So this clearly, in a very, very detailed, clear eyewitness account, describes the performance of a miracle play about the resurrection, performed by the townspeople as is usual. Over 150 years before the first reference to any of the mystery plays, or the Corpus Christi plays, which are not mentioned in Beverley until 1377, and in York just the year before, in 1376. The Coventry plays are first mentioned in 1392, the Chester plays in 1421, the Newcastle plays 1427, the Wakefield plays 1468. And as I said, 1215 was that account. If it was as is usual, presumably they've been putting on these plays since the 1100s, since the 12th century. So it is with this background we find again in Beverley the first surviving reference, and even more miraculously, the entire surviving text of the earliest piece of secular, that is non-religious drama, in all of the British Isles. The manuscript copy, which you have in your handout and is the play, which we're going to put on, exists in two forms. What you have there is Dame Sirrah and the Weeping Bitch, a bitch as in a female dog, which now rests in the British Museum in London and dates to circa 1275, 60 years after the Beverley Resurrection play. Now, this is the play we're going to hear read dramatically later on. Together with the play Dame Sirrah, Also in the British Museum are the fragmentary remains of the story or the interlude of the student and the girl, of which only 84 lines, the opening 2 scenes, survive. And it took a while for this connection to be made, and I mean, I partly discovered that because I was shocked and quite stunned. I run a course in the Monk's Walk pub on Poets and Pilgrims every month. We're starting again next week, in which we're looking at the York and Wakefield mystery plays, and we've been looking through medieval English verse, and I suddenly realized that Dame Sirreth is the full text of the story of the student and the girl. The first 84 lines are identical. The characters are identical. The subject matter is identical. It is the same play. History is about making connections, and making a connection of something which is often hiding there in plain sight. But it's all about connections. The reason that we can make the Beverley connection to both these survivals, because they're both written in English and they're written in an East Yorkshire or an East Midlands dialect. And technically speaking, either Lincoln or Beverley could both lay claim to them. But as Lincoln, which Beverley is much the same in size and in wealth during this period, as Lincoln didn't have an earlier tradition of theatre, as seen in the Resurrection play, nor did it develop mystery plays on the scale either of Beverley or of York, it seems highly likely that Beverley has the better claim. And that's even without bringing in the whole music thing. Both plays probably, let's call them one, had an earlier French origin, when traveling jongleurs or troubadours sung similar stories to this one. Whatever, though, I believe, what I believe may well be the case, is this bawdy, irreverent, rude, satirical comedy, a sort of medieval Benny Hill. It is a farce, and it is from the tradition of farces, is in the tradition of trickster plays, trickster tales and plays, a bit similar to Chaucer's Miller's Tale in the Canterbury Tales. And in the moral lesson, if there is one, because this isn't a religious play, it's a secular play, is don't be gullible, don't get tricked, but also be honest. Don't hide your desires through a fake modesty and a fake loyalty, as will become clear when you read through the innuendo and double entendre of this girl, Marjorie, trying to defend her virtue unsuccessfully. Now, what I suspect is that the medieval players who put on these plays, probably, like the musicians and the minstrels, were traveling and wandering people, like the troubadours and jongleurs of Brittany and Normandy in France. And there's a whole PhD waiting to be written here, because we tend to think about people who travel in the Middle Ages either as being pilgrims, or they're merchants who are trading, because most people are tied to the land, to their lord of the manor, and they have to work in the fields. But there's another category, all these minstrels, who clearly are wandering around, being quite well paid, going from town to town, and also going from noble house to noble house, doing a gig for the Earl of Northumberland, then doing another gig for somebody in York, and then doing another gig for the Earl of Lincoln, down to Norwich, back up again. So actually, I suspect that this play was actually performed in both Lincoln and in Beverley, as part of a tour, in much the same way that repertory theatres today go on a tour. York Theatre Royal, up to Durham, up to Newcastle. We'll do Manchester, then we'll do Birmingham. Well, in the Middle Ages, I suppose you'd done Beverley, Lincoln, York, Durham, Newcastle, maybe Norwich. Now, jumping to the mystery plays. The mystery plays in Beverley, in which we don't have any surviving text of the actual play, were probably very similar to the York cycle of plays, which are much more famously known. Now, although we don't have the surviving text of the plays of Beverley, we do know the names and the subject matter of many of the plays, and which guilds perform them. And we also have an account roll of records of payments for costumes and for props and for staging equipment. So we have in the play Paradise, which is basically Adam and Eve, we have payments being made for angels' wings, for a sword which goes on fire, which the angel uses to get Adam and Eve out of paradise. And there's a payment for their fig leaves, and there's payment for other things. There are also records of the town governors, the 12, fining various guilds if either they failed to perform their plays, or even if they did, the town governors felt that the play had been performed badly, which could be anything from just sloppily, or them just going, oh, I didn't like that. That was rubbish. And the fines could be considerable. The plays were performed outdoors, at various stations around the town, such as Saturday Market, the Fish Market, Flemingate, the Wednesday Market. But one distinctive, seemingly unique aspect of the Beverley plays is that, unlike at York, where they were performed on wagons or wheeled carts, in Beverley they were rather performed at a fixed, permanent point where each guild would build a castle. And they called them castles. An elaborate stage area with tiered seating for the guild members and the town alderman, with the other townsfolk standing around or watching seated on the ground. The death of medieval entertainment was largely caused by the religious changes of the Reformation. It became too closely associated with Roman Catholicism and was assigned by both Protestants and Puritans as either idolatry or blasphemous, or teaching Catholic theology, or it was seen as leading people into sin, the quagmire of sin and evil. It is almost as if having fun now became more sinful than ever. We don't know exactly when Beverley's mystery plays, or the Corpus Christi plays, which went alongside them, which also took the form of a procession and a pageant coming through the town, actually came to an end. But it was probably in the early years of Elizabeth I's reign, circa 1570. Surprisingly, even though we do have lots of references to payments and stuff, because some records just haven't survived, the last documentary reference we have to the mystery play cycle in Beverley being performed is actually 1520. So there's a 50-year gap there. And in 1520, we only know that because the Beverley cycle was rewritten and refashioned by a poet and priest called William Pyers, who travelled to Beverley from Wrestle Castle, which was owned by the Percy family and was probably one of the Earl of Northumberland's personal chaplains. Now, the plays were certainly performed in 1520, and they must have continued because you just had, a major revision, a new version of it. But rather unfortunately, in that last reference, we also know that three individuals of the plays performed then, were heavily fined for being rubbish, for just basically a bad performance. I'm afraid that's how they go out of history. Now, in the town's accounts, which I have looked through in the Treasurer's House in the archives, the record for 1519 to 1520, the accounts of the 12 governors, under a long list of forfeitures and transgressions, has this: fines being issued of 2 shillings to Richard Trollope, alderman of the Painters' Guild, for that his play, The Three Kings of Cologne. Cologne Cathedral was a major pilgrimage centre during the Middle Ages, and it was believed that the biblical 3 wise men, the 3 kings, the 3 magi of the Nativity, were buried there. So this is the play of the 3 wise men. But the alderman thought that Richard Trollope and the painters had performed the play so badly and so disorderly, in contempt of the whole community and in the presence of many strangers, that they were fined a substantial sum of 2 shillings, which would probably have been a month to 6 weeks' income. And they played it. It was also, the town governors felt that their pride had been hit as well. Because not only was it badly done, they said in the fine, "You did this in contempt of the whole community and in the presence of many strangers," which brought Beverley's name into disrepute. It's quite a vicious critic, isn't it? The town also fined 12 pence to Richard Gainstang, alderman of the Tailors' Guild, because his play, which was called Sleeping Pontius Pilate, was badly played against the ordinances. But more curiously was the fine of 2 shillings to William Patson, alderman of the Drapers' Guild, for his play, I'm not told what this is, which also was so badly played, disorderly again, but they also added a further 4 pence fine for the same play because his actors and its stage were not covered with either decent or honest dresses or costumes. The mind boggles. Did tell you we might get a bit rude in this, but there you go. Of interest, by the way, while we're in those accounts, there are also records under the common expenses, and this is just a broadening out into entertainment in a more general sense, of 6 shillings 8 pence being paid to John Green, who was the bearward of Lord Henry, Earl of Northumberland, for the exhibition of dancing bears in the marketplace in Saturday Market. And a very expensive payment of 45 shillings and 6 pence for the expenses of the 12 governors and other gentlemen to watch the mystery plays and the Corpus Christi plays, and also providing an extra 16 shillings to provide 4 new cushions for them. Now, 45 shillings is getting on to £2.75. That is 6 months' income to even a professional priest. So the councillors are in the trough. There was clearly a revival, I'm going to do some brushstrokes now, of both music and drama during the brief reign of Queen Mary I. As the town accounts record in 1556, payments of 20 shillings, that's £1, that's a lot, in reward for the Queen's players performing in Beverley. And in 1557, payment of 10 shillings in reward to Lord Scrope's players playing in Beverley, as well as the considerable 40 shillings, that's £2, for the minstrels and waits of Beverley to provide them with new liveries and new badges. Again, in 1562, 20 shillings were paid to the Queen's players again, and 13 shillings 4 pence to the Duke of Suffolk's players. The minstrels benefit with another 10 shillings for even more badges, and 53 shillings and 4 pence for their tunics. The rock stars of the Middle Ages, and they've got the costumes to do it. I mean, even a queen would be quite happy with that for her wardrobe. So they must have been pretty impressive. There's also extra payments to all of them, including the bearwards and the minstrels and the actors. They all get 5 pence for wine, just on top. I'm told red wine is meant to help you not lose your voice when you go on stage. Maybe that's where that comes from. The cultural life of the town may briefly during this period, the 16th century, have benefited from the presence of a printer. Just to go back to books. For a Dutchman, Hugh Goes, from 1509 onwards, is said to have had a printing press in Highgate. And as mentioned, there is throughout the country, as I said, a growing list of payments to these travelling players, sponsored either from the Royal Court, from Queen Mary or Queen Elizabeth I, or leading members of the aristocracy, including Dudley, Lord Dudley, who was meant to be a suitor to Elizabeth I's hand, and they're performing in Beverley. This is a big company you're getting up to Beverley. This is not just the local rep. It's coming from the Royal Court or the leading dukes and earls of the town. So Beverley still draws considerable cultural weight and at a high level. There are also references to unspecified plays being put on regularly by the pupils of Beverley Grammar School, who formed their own little company called the Grammar School Players. And amongst all these sort of passing bits of references for entertainment, we have in the town's accounts, we have another part of entertainment which I wish we could bring back. I might actually write to the town council and say we should do this again, because obviously it's coming up. Shrove Tuesday in early Elizabethan Beverley. Now we have a pancake race, but I'm afraid that's nothing in comparison to what they did during the reign of Elizabeth I, because the town's watermen in Beverley were fined in 1575 by the town council for not performing jousting in the beck, as is the town's custom. Water jousting on a boat, you know, so you're going to get dunked and probably get quite, you know, most people in the Middle Ages probably couldn't swim, so this is really quite a dangerous thing. Jousting in the back on the boats. Yeah, please do support my letter. Now, bear dancing has been already mentioned. But in the crueler aspects of entertainment, thankfully abandoned in the early 19th century, a gift is mentioned in 1571 by Thomas Normanville of a bull to the town to be baited in the Saturday marketplace. And the town corporation provided entertainment for gentlemen at a cockpit in 1586. In terms of the public drinking culture of Beverley, there's the only really reference I have to alcohol in this. It was ordered in 1592, when Beverley had a population of roughly 5,000, there were to be no more than 40 alehouses in the town. Several are known by name. The Bull outside North Bar, the Swan within North Bar, the Hart, as in the female deer, in Wednesday Market, the Tabard in Eastgate, now the Sun Inn, where the Pilgrimage of Grace started, and of course the George and Dragon in Highgate, now the Monk's Walk, is mentioned in the 17th century and could well be earlier. Now, returning to theatre, I know I'm moving about a bit there. The mystery plays, therefore, in the Reformation are largely got rid of, largely by the Church, by Protestants and Puritans for theological reasons, in the 1560s, and this really does kill off English theatre. So we are so lucky that the first purpose-built theatres appear and emerge in London during the 1570s. Now, partly you had the emergence of the Queen's players, the Duke of Suffolk's players, the Percy family up at Leconfield would have had their own players, you know, and then they come onto the scene two of the greatest playwrights, I think we'd all agree, probably in world history, William Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe, who both wrote for and became part of professional companies of players sponsored and employed by the English nobility. Now finally, because I know I've got to keep to time, so I'll turn to dancing. We have plenty of pieces in illuminated medieval manuscripts of peasants in the village fields dancing, as well as the more elaborate and formal dancing at the royal and noble courts. Dancing at the amateur level was ordinarily round dancing hand in hand, and a lot of it may indeed survive in the Scottish ceilidhs, or barn dancing or folk dancing, and of course in Morris dancing. Carols were the principal form of secular music in medieval England, and they are the musical core of the entertaining chain or carol dance. Now, either you can see this as a medieval form of the hokey cokey, or more often it would be a circle dance performed by the dancers, hands clasped or arms linked into a circle. They would take a few steps to the left as their leader, normally standing in the middle of the circle, sang a stanza of the song. The dancers then marked time with treading steps as all sang the chorus. And this basic dance could be varied in many ways, from dancing in line to miming out the story of the carol. And the carols, this is secular dancing I'm talking about, would normally be stories about heroism, or love, romance, or religion. And for the most part of them, they seem to have been joyful. But certainly, and foretelling what I think is probably the origin of Morris dances, but I might be wrong, is that the most popular tales were told and danced and enacted were those of Robin Hood and Will Scarlet and his merry men. Caroling could be done outdoors, either at village feasts or celebrations in the churchyard, which was a favourite venue, much to the chagrin and criticism of local clergy, but they could also be performed indoors in a lordly hall, such as the local lord of the manor. And there are even occasions of them taking place in church naves. Churchmen repeatedly repudiated carols, medieval and early modern, and Reformation because they thought they were lascivious, and with their horse they would lead into sin. And of course it was fun, and we can't have any of that. And your mind should really, if you're doing it in the churchyard, should be bent to more spiritual matters. And in confession manuals, we do have carols being criticised and forcing confessors to impose specific special penances for sins of voice, sins of dancing, sins of movement, sins of touching. On a more courtly level, the Pavan dance begins to emerge in the 15th century. The earliest documentary reference to Morris dancing in England occurs in 1448 in London, when the Worshipful Order of Goldsmiths make a payment to Sir Morris Men. But its origins, however, are clearly much earlier. And the name Morris Dancers appears to be derived from the Spanish Moors, the Muslim conquerors of Spain, of much of medieval Spain. So its origins may even lie in the Middle East. Its development in medieval England and its association of dancing around the maypole, which clearly had phallic implications, that's obvious, as a fertility symbol, was also its link with the May Day festivities. And because this is a bit lascivious and so on, and because May sounds a bit like Mary, the church wanted to turn this into a Marian festival about the Blessed Virgin Mary and stop you having fun. But all too often, ways to stop people having fun just don't work because people ignore them. And this brings us back to the popular tales and songs of Robin Hood, that the Morris dancers would come dressed as Robin Hood, Will Scarlet, Maid Marian, 2 by 2, and they would dance around the maypole retelling stories of Robin Hood. So, I have talked for almost my allotted time. I think I'm even gone a minute over. There are lots of things, obviously, which I can't cover, but to return, in that broad sense of entertainment, to what do you do at home? You know, so you can't really dance in your house if you're just a peasant. It's probably not big enough. You can't really put on a play, although actually they probably did do things like charades, and they probably did some acting and some mimicry. There were other things. They did have games, and they did have board games in the Middle Ages. They did, of course, have chess. They did have earlier forms of backgammon. They did play cards, and they did play at dice, and they did gamble. And one of the biggest gamblers of all was Elizabeth of York, who was the wife of King Henry VII and the oldest daughter of King Edward IV. And this, I'm going to conclude, is your pub quiz question for 10. By what form of entertainment is Elizabeth of York, an inveterate gambler, better recognized as? Absolutely right. In the English deck of playing cards, she is the Queen of Hearts. And if you look at the Queen of Hearts and look at a picture of Elizabeth of York, you suddenly go, oh yeah, she really is. And therein, I end my talk.
Well, thank you, Marcus, for an absolutely brilliant and entertaining talk, and all sorts of things that I mean, while you're thinking up some questions, clergy are well known for moaning about all the things that go on Sundays and keep people away from going to church. But if you think it's entirely a modern phenomenon, go back to 1520, which was the year in which the Tower of St. Mary's catastrophically collapsed during the morning service. But the contemporary account says that, in fact, there were fewer casualties than there might have been because much of the congregation had gone off to watch the bear baiting. So, plus ça change. So, I mean, Marcus will take any questions now. We have some questions, and then we'll move on to the next part of the evening. I will bring the microphone round. Please, as I said to people before, you really have to treat it like a lollipop. You almost don't actually lick it, not very hygienic, but really keep it very close to your mouth and don't wave it around, because then you'll start to oscillate, and we don't want you oscillating.
Thank you, Marcus, as ever. Really good. I think the other thing I'd like to point out is that, yes, we've got a lot of minstrels along there, but there's this wonderful set higher up here, and there are angels above the players, and the angels are looking down on the instruments, and the ones up near the door, at the far end, there's a lady playing a tambourine. Yeah, okay, but she's got the angel above has got her hands fairly firmly over her ears and going, ooh. Next to her is somebody playing a shawm, which amongst early medieval students is better known as blowing the cow's horn the wrong way. It is the most appalling noise. And the angel there is going, ah. Oh. So you get the sense of humour in the theatre in that as well.
The cacophonous nature of medieval life, and it would have been noisy, and that's why I'm so glad that the Morris dance is going to make lots of noise with your bells and your clocks and everything, because I think the medieval world must have been quite a noisy world. There's one thing I didn't have time in my talk, which I should have mentioned, because it comes back to these sculptures and statues we've got, particularly in the misericords in the choir in the Minster. You have to go and look at that wonderful collection of 68 different misericords of a world upside down. And this is another Beverley claim to fame, is that during Christmas time, Beverley would be known and would participate in the Feast of Fools and the election of a boy bishop, who was normally a young chorister who was elected as the bishop for the day, and everybody had to obey him. And this would lead to riotous feasting over the Christmas period. Normally it was just for a day, but at some places it went on for a couple of weeks, the entire Christmas period. And they would get very drunk and very things. And there was the world upside down, in which the first shall be last and the last shall be first. A chaplain would be appointed to write the sermon for the boy bishop, and the boy bishop gave it out, and everybody had to obey whatever his whim was. Now the church, obviously, this was a recipe for disaster. The medieval church was completely against this. It goes back to the early 15th century, and they're trying to abolish it then. And there are references to Archbishop Neville particularly forbidding Beverley Minster from doing it, because Beverley Minster's got a bad reputation for this one. But they keep ignoring the bishop, and they keep electing the Feast of Fools and the boy bishop. And this national movement in every cathedral, even Henry VIII tries to stop it, and he fails. He fails to stop it because people keep just doing it. It's hard to stop people having fun. Edward VI also fails. Mary I puts up with it. It is only finally suppressed by Elizabeth I by Act of Parliament in 1559. It has been dwindling after all these royal attacks since Henry VIII. But, and this is referred to in the town account, where do you think was the last place in all of Britain to abandon the boy bishop and the Feast of Fools in 1555? Beverley Minster. Sorry, next question, if there is one.
Next question.
Hello. I found it quite interesting and surprising that Queen Mary I had her own set of players, as you said, the Queen's players, because history would have it that she spent pretty much all of her reign being bitter and twisted and going around burning Protestant heretics. So how much of a patron of the arts was Queen Mary?
Queen Mary had quite a hard press. And don't forget, history is written by the winners, and Mary I certainly wasn't a winner. And she had a miserable husband in Philip II of Spain. It was dreadful. In fact, she didn't start burning people to 1555, and Henry VIII executed far more people than Mary I ever did. She's brought up with an incredibly lonely childhood. You know, I'm somewhat of a defender for Mary, and her tragedy is she spends most of her time losing the plot, thinking she's pregnant, which she clearly isn't. It's a phantom pregnancy, because she's getting into her 30s, and she's sort of scared that actually England's going to become Protestant, so she takes refuge in that. But there's no reason to think she didn't enjoy the theatre. As a good Catholic, she probably did. I mean, Catholics were never as hostile in the Reformation towards the theatre as the Protestants were, because, you know, having fun was somewhat easier for Catholics to get their head round.
Hi. You mentioned the plays at Corpus Christi, and you also mentioned the mystery plays. Were they one and the same thing, or were they quite different in terms of the content?
Yeah, no, they were different. They happened at much the same time, in the space of 2 to 3 weeks together, and they were similar in their staging. They were the big event of the day. Corpus Christi is just some of the plays which would not have necessarily been quite so clearly biblical. They'd be focused on the Eucharist, hence the body of Christ, Corpus Christi Day. So there'd be like monstrances put out. There might be a play, I say, on the institution of the Lord's Supper, so the betrayal of Jesus, stuff like that. But they were a mixture of morality plays. So you get 3 types of plays in the Middle Ages. Mystery plays, and it's got nothing to do with mystery in terms of anything. It's just they're done by the guilds. So the Guild of Goldsmiths, you know, the Guild of Carpenters, the Guild of Drapers, the Guild of Painters, the Guild of Butchers. And they normally do something like the Guild of Shipwrights are doing Noah's Flood, stuff like that. The Guild of Nailers and blacksmiths are doing the crucifixions, they've got the nails ready. And the mysteries it's the mysteries of their craft, you know, and you have to be a member of the Guild to learn it. And then you've got the miracle plays, which tell a miracle, like St. John of Beverley's story of the boy who fell from the roof. Brought back to life. And then you've got the morality plays, which the Corpus Christi things might fit more into a sort of morality play, which is just sort of a Christian sort of sermon on good behaviour. And then, of course, you have this miscellaneous secular drama, which is largely comic and bawdy and rude, which we're about to hear in a moment, Dame Siriph, or the story of the student and the girl. Whilst I'm here, 2 books to recommend to you. I always do try to recommend some books. You can buy these surprisingly cheaply on Amazon or eBay. Both really good. Pleasures and Pastimes in Medieval England by Compton Rees. Wonderful, lavish colour illustrations. Both published by Alan Sutton Publishers. And Food and Feast in Medieval England by P. Philip Hammond. And locally, Beverley Civic Society, Barbara English and Clos Tyra have published a booklet for the Civic Society, Food, Feasts and Festivals in Medieval Beverley and the East Riding, which I do recommend to you, and actually is also lavishly illustrated, has some original research on the banquets and the feast days provided by the Percy family and the entertainment they got, the minstrels and the dancers. There.
Time for a couple more questions, if there are any. Otherwise, we will move on to presenting to you the play.
When I was once out walking, I heard some fellows talking of a man most proud and clerkish, a swat he was most pert and smooth beneath his shirt, and got a mighty sparkish. This chap was nearly mad with loving, which was bad, because the girl was married. For her he thumped his chest. He couldn't sleep or rest. A load of love he carried. The fellow lashed his mind in pondering how to find a way to have the lady. And as it chanced one day, the husband went away on business, trade or shady. At once our hero made his way to where she stayed, a fancy habitation. There in the hall he found her, with natty finery around her, and made this declaration.
Now may Almighty God be here.
If I deserve a bit of cheer, you're welcome at my fire. Come in, and if you want it so, sit down, and kindly let me know what is your desire. For by our Lord, the Heavenly King, if I can do a single thing that you may find diverting, I shall oblige, as you will find, and doing what you have in mind, find nothing disconcerting.
May God requite you, lady, if you don't betray me in a tiff, or hear me with displeasure. I'll tell you what I've come to do, but should my business anger you, my pain would pass all measure.
Oh, never fear, dear Willikin. I'd not commit the shameful sin of thwarting all your yearning. For anything I might possess, I never studied churlishness, nor shall I now start learning. You may utter all your will, and I shall listen sitting still to any good suggestion. And if it's right what you require, then I shall do what you desire, without the slightest question. And though your words should bring me shame, I'd never saddle you with blame. So don't be apprehensive.
Now, lady, that I have your leave, if I were churl enough to greed, it would be most offensive. You do me, lady, utmost grace, so I shall set out all my case, displaying it before you. My coming here, it's hows and whys, for I could never utter lies. Nor shall I assure you. I've loved you many and many a year, and although I've never journeyed here to show my love's anxiety, for when your master's here at home, a man can't chat with you alone, at least not with propriety. I heard one mention yesterday, as I was musing on my way, that your man, your noble warder, I heard the worthy man had gone to market at Boston, on Lincoln's eastern border. And since I knew that he was out, that's why I've gone about to have this conversation. Happy the man and gay his life who can dispose of such a wife in splendid isolation. So come, dear lady, and agree, and now and everlastingly, I'll secretly adore you.
By Jesus Christ, our heavenly King, I swear that I'll do no such thing. May God above restore you. I have my lord, who is my spouse, who took me virgin to his house. In honour did we do it. I love him well, and he loves me. Steel true is our fidelity, and we shall never rue it. Although he's working far away, I should be wrong to go astray and set up as a whore. Oh no, I shall never contract to do that very faithless act in bed or on the floor. My man I never would beguile, though he were many 100 mile beyond celestial Rome. No lure on earth, however great, would make me take a man as mate before my lord came home.
Lady, change your mind. You once were courteous, you once were kind, and shall be so again. Do it for God, who made us both. Please think afresh and don't be loath. Have pity on my pain.
Alas, alas, am I a fool? I swear if I may thrive till Yule, you've had a stupid dream. Me think afresh, nothing so base. My lord's a man of might and grace, and held in much esteem. And I'm a wife both good and true, a truer one man never knew in all our generation. That man shall always be denied who woos me with his sensual pride to harm my reputation.
Oh, sweetheart, darling, mercy, please. Such open villainies as these are not what I propose. As one in search of loving favour, I ask a love of secret savour. The more the better, God knows.
I swear I'll never feed again if you've not wasted all your pain. So off you go, beloved brother. I won't have you nor any other except my husband. Go away, for that's what I shall always say.
Yes, my lady, so I suppose. So that poor man is sunk in woes, who sweats and toils without success. He can but grieve, I must confess. And as for me, I'll say just this, yours is a love that I shall miss. So, madam, may I say good day, and Christ who holds eternal sway, so work it that you change your view, and I no longer mourn for you.
So, feeling glum, he went away and racked his brain by night and day to find a way to change her. A friend said, now then, don't despair. See Dame Cerise in an affair. She's not a bad arranger. So off he went without delay and shut his eyes upon the way, thus dodging every meeting, though bursting with his grief and rage. His words to her were mild and sage. He gave her gentle greeting.
Ah, Dame Ceres, and may God bless you. I came in order to address you on the subject of my need. And if you may give me sustentation, you shall have as compensation a rich reward indeed.
You're very welcome, lovely youth. And if I can assist, in truth, I'll up and do my very best. So let me listen to your request.
Ah, dear old lady, grim despair is blasting me with woe and care. Mighty misery mars my life, and all because of one sweet wife, and Marjorie is her name. I have loved her many a day, and yet she firmly says me nay. That is why I came. And if her feelings are not changed, for grief I shall become deranged, or end my wretched life. Yes, I've thought of suicide, until a friend may me decide to tell you all, old wife. He told me that, beyond all doubt, you could bring my aims about and rescue me from woe. By certain crafts and things you do, you shall find great riches will accrue, if you can work it so.
Penedicity be herein. Dear boy, this is the way to sin. O Lord, for his sweet name, may it not count to you for shame. God's anger you will surely stir, if you put on me this slur. For I am old and sick and lame. Disease has made me meek and tame. Bless you, dear young chap, in case you suffer from some mishap, for slandering me with your suspicion, and me in such a frail condition. I am a dame of godly parts, and have no skill in magic arts. A virtuous daily life I lead, with paternoster and with creed, which help good people in their need. These grant us all success in life, including me, a poor old wife. Confound the man who sent you here, and may his soul be struck with fear. May God in justice spoil his luck, for saying I would have such truck.
Dear lady, trust me when I say quite of a sense my words convey. The man who sent me merely stated, you'll see our quarrel was abated. So if you make a sweet accord between myself and my adored, I'll give you gifts in plenteous store, many a mark and pounds galore, warm slippers and a fur-lined dress, if your efforts have success, and if you help your uttermost, many benefits might you boast.
Now, Willikin, don't lie to me. In truth, do you speak this seriously? You love the Lady Marjorie?
Yes, oh lady, passionately. I love her madly, fit to kill, unless I bend her to my will.
I pity you, dear Willikin. May God ensure you quickly win. Now, if I knew you'd keep it dark, I think I safely might embark on seeking what you covet. So raise your hand and swear to bind yourself to silence. Then I'll find a way to tell her of it. I would not for the world be brought before the bishop's holy court for playing such a game. Their judgment would be quickly given, and I upon an ass be driven by priests in utter shame.
But, mother, I in truth should hate disgrace and shame to be your fate. Though striving for my good, I shall fight with all my might to keep it secret. Here I plight my faith by holy rood.
Welcome words, my Willikin. Now it's settled, I'll begin a plan you'll find contenting. In time to come, you'll bless this day. So perk up, man, be blithe and gay, and stop all that lamenting. You came here on your lucky day. I'll visit her without delay and give her cause to ponder. On your behalf I'll so contrive there won't be any man alive of whom she will be fonder.
Well spoken, Dame Cirrus. I vow the peace of God is with me now, and luck shall come to you. Now take this £1, and with it buy sheep for fold and pig for sty, as earnest of your due.
I swear by the joys of floor and roof, no pound was spent in any behoof of half such power as this is. For you shall see a wonder done, the craftiest trick beneath the sun. Come, pup, obey your missus. Here's some pepper you must eat, a mustard in the place of meat, to wet your little eye. When the tears begin to dribble, I shall invent a cunning quibble, and I know where and why.
What is the good of such a game? I swear you've lost your wits, old dame, feeding mustard to a bitch.
Be quiet, fool. Control your itch. For with this trick, by God above, I'll make her give you all her love. Nor shall I have a minute's rest until I've seen our efforts blessed. Wait here for me till I come home.
Yes, by all the summer bloom, nothing shall drag me from your door until you come back here once more.
So Dame Ceres began to go, pretending to be sunk in woe, towards the lady's dwelling, and at the portal bowing low, she made a mighty mournful show, thus her fable telling.
O Lord, the fate of wives, poor and wretched all their lives. No man can suffer like a wife, left without the means of life. And that's my case, you will admit, for I can neither walk nor sit. I am almost parched and starved to death. I wish I hadn't another breath. With cold and hunger I'm so whacked, my limbs won't work, and that's a fact. Will no good person kindly fetch away the soul of such a wretch?
Good woman, may the Lord unbind you. At once, this very day I find you meet, for the love of God. I greatly pity your distress, for you have got a shabby dress, and you are badly shod. Come in at once and have some food.
May God reward you for doing good, and he who hung upon the rood, who fasted 40 days, and who rules earth and heaven, reward you too.
Here's bread and meat, sit down and dine, and here's a cup brimful of wine. Make merry, please do what I ask, and God reward you for your task.
Then said that ancient crafty dame,
and Christ should really curse her name.
All sins I would forgive the man who would cut off my head, and how I wish that I were dead. But still, alas, I live.
Good dame, of what do you complain?
The reason for my woe is plain. I had a daughter fair, you never saw a lovelier face. Her husband too was full of grace, noble beyond compare. My daughter loved him past belief, and that is why I moan with grief. Her husband left the house one day, he had some business far away, and that, alas, was what undid her. A tonsured cleric came and bid her, with cunning words and haughty glances, to be his lover. These advances the girl refused, and he could say nothing to help him get his way. But then he started to bewitch and change my daughter to a bitch, and this is she of whom I tell. My heart was broken by that spell. Look how her eyes are simply streaming, and on her cheeks the tears are gleaming. You see, dear lady, it's no wonder my wretched heart has burst asunder. So any young and pretty wife shows how little she loves her life, if when a cleric plays the squire, she doesn't yield to his desire.
Beloved Christ, the other day a cleric came in such a way, and I refused his love. I'm sure that he will change my shape. Old lady, how shall I escape? Help me, by God above.
Already God has given you help, because you're not a bitch or whelp. But if another clerk should come, dear girl, you must at once succumb. Do as he says, that's my advice, and be his love at any price. If you say no to his demand, you'll surely get a worse command.
Beloved Christ, oh wretched day, that cleric sadly went away before he'd even won me. Beyond all love of goods or fee, I wish that once he'd lain with me, and then again had done me. I love you, grandam, evermore, if you bring Willikin to my door, the cleric of whom I tell. I'll give you gifts and prosper you by anything that I can do. I swear it by God's bell.
In very truth, my dear young dame, if I may search and get no blame, I'll seek the fellow out. If in the street or by the gate I see him, I shan't hesitate to speak, you needn't doubt. Good day, my lady, off I go.
And as I have instructed so, you'll do it, won't you, dear? I'll never laugh again or sing or be content unless you bring Willikin to me here.
My dear young lady, if I may, I'll bring the gentleman here today, or use my best endeavour.
So home she went, and going in, she found our Willikin, as tense by God as ever.
Sweet Willikin, no more distress, for in your errand I've had success. She sent me out to get you, so quickly up and follow, sir. The thing you want to do to her, she promised me she'd let you.
May God, who rules both earth and heaven, reward you, mother, 7 times 7.
With Dame Ceres at once he went to see his mistress with intent. And there at the lady's dwelling, Ceres explained how she'd found her Willikin, and told profound and holy grace at the telling.
Young lady, I looked for Willikin, and now I have brought the good man in.
Oh, welcome, Willikin, darling thing. You are more welcome than the king. Oh, Willikin, my precious sweeting, I give you my most loving greeting, and all your will beside. You see, I've wholly changed my mind, and wouldn't dream of being unkind, in case you drooped and died.
Lady, by my fast till noon, I shall devotedly and soon accomplish what you say. And now, old mother, you must go, for by my faith you surely know that she and I must play.
God knows I'll leave you, holy sir. And so if any man lacks sense, and can't, in spite of all expense, bring his darling to it, I'm ready, if you'll only pay, to set him on the winning way. For I know how to do it.
If there is a moral, don't trust students.
And now we move from words to dance and music. And so we have the dancers, the Garland Dancers, to perform for us as the concluding part of our evening. Thank you.
traditional dancing, which often took the form of structured songs, so there'd be choruses and verses in between. Now our first dance will show that quite nicely because we've got choruses. We start with a chorus, which comes in throughout the dance, and then in between you'll hear me shouting out figures or verses, which is different patterns of movements in between. So this first dance is called Wednesday Market.
That dance was called Wednesday Market, which probably is a familiar sound to you because it's just a place down the road that way, I think. And a lot of dances that came from medieval times, the traditional dances, in different towns and villages, each people that wanted to dance would get together and they'd make up their own dances. to do, and they would then name them after the place that they lived in. So that wasn't actually a medieval dance, but we made it up and we named it after Wednesday Market, which is where we live. And our next dance, sorry, I'm out of breath. The next dance is called Beverley, and we've chosen it to do for you because it's called Beverley, but actually it was a dance that was shown to us by another team, and we adapted it to make it our own dance, and then we named it Beverley as they would traditionally have done in the past. So this one is called Beverley. Now, just as all the villages and towns would have made up their own dances, they would also have looked around for something to maybe enhance that dance with, some equipment or other. So quite often it was just hefty sticks that they'd find in the woods or whatever. If they were a bit richer, maybe they would dance with swords or rags that became hankies, or even bobbins. So our next two dances show you some other equipment that we use. So you've just seen the floral garlands, but we've now got some ribbon sticks. And then after that, we'll be showing you a dance with bobbins from cotton mills of the northwest, because that's our style of dancing. We dance the northwest style, even though we live in East Yorkshire. So our first dance is called Knutsford, and that's from Cheshire, and our second dance will be called Bottom from North Yorkshire, but with because we've mixed all the traditions now, we're going to be dancing with cotton reels. Thank you. Right, now that brings us to our final dance for tonight. Now, we were going to have 12 people tonight, but one of our dancers' car broke down in Harrogate, so we're one short, which means that we're now only going to do this dance for 9 instead of 12. But it's going to include all our uninjured dancers who are here tonight, apart from the 2 that we're going to be with, the one that's not here. So they range in age, well, not age, but some of them have only just started dancing, which you probably won't be able to tell. And others have been with us probably since nearly medieval times themselves, actually. So, this is a dance called Grenocide. And we're going to try and do it in a Y shape. It was going to be in a cross shape, but now we've had to quickly change it into a Y shape. So fingers crossed it'll work. And you'll see us all dancing Grenocide. Thank you. Oh, and we hope to see you again in the future soon, because we dance outside in Beverley. You've probably seen us before. Yes, lovely to have entertained you tonight, and see you again soon.